In this review video, I'm going to go through the information we went through with our week 10 week 9 workshop, sorry. The idea of this workshop is to familiarize yourself with using Illustrator and Photoshop together to customize type and to make interesting style typography effects. You don't necessarily have to use this in your project, but hopefully this will inspire you to explore other ways you can manipulate type using Photoshop and Illustrator to create some really cool looking, interesting effects. So to start, we're going to start in Illustrator. I'm going to type in the word frozen, and I'm going to set it all caps in bold. Trajan is the typeface at about 125 points. So here I am in Illustrator. I'm going to type in the word frozen. I've got it set Trajan Pro bold. I'm going to make it about 125 point type. So I've got the word frozen, nice and big here. 125 point type, Trajan Pro bold. I'm going to set the color to light blue, add no stroke, and then I'm going to apply the distort and transform effect, roughen. So let's select our color here, make it a light blue, no stroke, and then apply distort and transform roughen, size being 0%, detail being 10 per inch. So effect, distort and transform, roughen, size being 0, and the detail being 10 per inch. What that's going to do is it's going to look like actually nothing is happening to the typeface. But what it's doing is it's basically artificially creating additional anchor points along the edges of the stroke. Now, normally, if we had size applied, it would be moving the stroke in and out from anchor point to anchor point, which gives you that kind of neat looking effect. But in this case, by setting it to 0, what it's doing is it's actually applying that artificial anchor point effect, but it's not actually making it zigzag out. We're going to do that with the next effect we're going to apply to it. Because we're actually going to use the tweak effect, distort and transform tweak. We're going to set it at about 2%. So effect, distort and transform, tweak. I'm going to set it, each one, it says here, at 2%. Now, the amount that you actually can use for whatever you're doing, it totally is up to you. The idea here, once again, is I'm just trying to show how we can use a combination of different tools to create interesting effects. In this case, it has broken up the edge of the letter forms and made it look quite rough and distorted, which we can then bring into Photoshop and use to our advantage to create some interesting stylized type effects for our poster. So I'm going to click OK. So now I've got that set up. I'm going to copy the file. I'm going to create a new, I'm going to copy the text from the file. I'm going to create a new Photoshop file, 4 by 10 inches at 150 dots per inch, red, green, blue, or RGB color space. So I'm going to select that type, Command C. I'll open up Photoshop. Bring it in here, create a new file, 10 inches wide, 4 inches tall, 150 dots per inch, RGB color space. By keeping this file as I'm working on it, whoops the daisy, what happened there? By keeping this file at 150 dots per inch while I'm working on it, it'll give me a decent resolution for the purposes of this exercise, but it's not going to be so large it's going to cause my computer to really slow down and chug along. All right, I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to paste it in as a smart object. That'll allow me to edit the text file if needed be. I'm going to double click on it to place place it. I can see it now there in my layers panel. There it is. And I'm going to call this frozen text. There we go. We're going to place it into our Photoshop file as a smart object, which we've done. We're going to create a new layer beneath it. We're going to fill it with dark blue. And then we're going to add a darker blue gradient starting from the top and working our way down. This is going to help to create a sense of depth. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'll call this blue background. I'm going to fill that with a darker blue. Got my color picker here. I can fill it either with my paint bucket, or I could use Edit, Fill. Keyboard shortcut is Shift Command 5, and that would allow me to fill the background as well. I'm going to add my gradient onto a separate layer just so that I have greater sense of editability as I'm editing or working with my file. So I'm going to call this one background gradients. The gradient tool is located here in the toolbar underneath, or in the same spot as the paint bucket. And when I select my gradient tool, I'm going to start by actually changing my color to a darker blue. And then up here in the control panel, I can see the gradient slider. I'm going to double click on that to open up my gradient editor. I want to use, you'll notice I've got my gradient set up. You probably don't have specific or personalized gradients. You're going to want to go under Basics, and you want to select the one that is Foreground to Transparent. This will make your blue dark color start and slowly fade out to transparent as we apply to the background. So now with my gradient set, I can click and drag, and it'll apply that gradient from the top to the bottom. Or I could do the opposite and apply it from the bottom up. I'm going to make my color a little bit darker. There we go. Now I've added just a nice little bit of background kind of effect to it. All right, the next step is we're going to add a layer style. Layer styles can be added through the layer panel, and they allow us to do all sorts of additional effects to any object that is on its own separate layer in Photoshop. In this case, we're going to be applying inner bevels, giving it a hard chisel, a depth of approximately 84%, upwards direction, 27 pixel size, 0 pixel soften, add some shading, gloss contour, highlight and shadow. So with that type selected, at the bottom of the layer panel, it looks like the letters FX. We click that to add a layer style. In this case, I'm going to select Bevel and Emboss. You'll notice there's many different layer styles that we can play with, and I would encourage you to try and play with all of them on your own time because you can do some really amazing things. I'm going to select Bevel and Emboss. There we are. I'm going to position this so I can see my text in the background. With Bevel and Emboss selected, I'm going to go for an inner bevel as my style. I'm going to select Chisel Hard for the technique. I'm going to give my depth, in this case, about 84%. It's approximate. I'm going to keep the direction upwards. My size I'm going to set to 27 pixels. And you'll notice what that's doing is it's creating this chiseled, beveled effect on my type. My soften I'm going to set to 0. That's going to help keep it crisp. If I set it upwards, you'll see it softens that bevel effect quite a bit. I want to keep it crisp and looking really sharp. Shading. I'm going to go with about 128 direction for the angle. You'll notice that this little icon here indicates which way the light is hitting the object, and you can maneuver it around however you please. I'm going to go with about 128. There we are. And the altitude I'm going to set as 26. There. The gloss contour I'm going to keep linear, which it is, but you'll notice that there are different ways you can control and play around with how the gloss affects on the letter forms. Ooh, yuck. It actually almost has more of an icy look than what I'm starting with, but I'm going to keep with the linear gloss contour. And then I'm going to have my white highlight set to 85%. As you can see, this indicates how much of a highlight is hitting the object. And my shadow, I'm going to choose a dark blue. I'm going to set that to multiply. That's the layer blending mode, and about 80%. So now you can see it looks as if the light's hitting our object from this side. We've got shadow, we've got a chiseled effect. It's already starting to look pretty interesting. The reason why we get this neat chiseled effect is because we applied that roughen and that tweak to the text in Illustrator. The next step we're going to do is add an inner glow. We're going to add an inner glow soft yellow, and I've indicated the number I'm using here. This is the hex code here, but you can approximate it. Blend mode will be screen at about 40%. The choke will be 0, and the size will be approximately 4 to 6 pixels. So with that same flare effect, I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to add an inner glow, so I can select that. Blend mode, as I said, is screen. That means it's going to lighten up the color. Multiplies, linear burns, color burns, darken it. The lighten and the screen, lighten it up. Opacity is going to be set to about 40%. Oh, I've got the blending options selected. Whoops a daisy. Switch that back to normal. I want my inner glow selected. Screen, 40%. There we go. I want my choke to be set to 0. My yellow, I'm going to set to EFF AB3. So it's a nice soft yellow. Double check that. FF EAB3. Got that number wrong there. There we are. My size is going to be about 4 to 6 pixels. So it's going to give just a little bit of glow on the edge. And depending on, it's up to you. You can always play with how much visibility, what size you want if it's not showing up that well. I'm going to go with a little softer of a yellow. There we go. I'll click OK. So now we've got that kind of neat frozen edge. You can see there in my layers panel, there's the bevel and emboss. There's the glowing edge, inner glow. We're going to add an outer glow to it now. Screen blending mode, 40% opacity, no noise, light blue color, 1% spread, 86 pixels in size. So I'll click back on that effects again. I'll go to outer glow. This time I'll make sure I do click on it. Screen blending mode. It gives a highlighting and transparent effect. Opacity about 40%. No noise. In the color here, I've got 6EE7FD. So it's a nice light blue. 1% spread. and the size about 86 pixels. The idea here is I'm just basically giving a soft glow outside the edge of the type to give it more of an ethereal kind of style look. Alright, so we've got ourselves some cool looking frozen text. The last step with the frozen text is we're going to actually bring in an image that has texture in it, and we're going to use a clipping mask to apply the image texture only where the word frozen is. So we're going to bring in that stock photo frosty natural pattern, which is in the same download folder. We're going to actually place it above the text layer. We're going to change the layer blending mode to luminosity, and we'll set it as an adjustment layer so that it only appears where the type is. So I'm going to bring in, oops, wrong one, that's for the second half. There we are. I'll bring in that image. I'm just going to resize it so that it's the size of my type, fitting nice and perfectly over it. There we are. Double click to place it. I'm going to set it as a clipping path or a clipping mask or an adjustment layer. I can do so from the flyout menu, the layers panel, and select create clipping mask. Or if you hover just between the layers and you hold down option, you'll notice your icon will let you apply it as a clipping mask as well. So either way works. And then with this set over top, I'm going to set the layer blending mode to luminosity. There we are. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the beveled, chiseled texture to show through, but it's going to add and give it just a little bit more of a frosty kind of effect. I'll bring the opacity down to a 70%. And now my frozen text looks like it is composed out of frozen ice. So this is one way we can use various text effects from Illustrator and Photoshop together to create an interesting looking final solution. This text effect by itself actually is quite similar to the text effect if you look at things like Lord of the Rings, where they've got those chiseled letters made out of gold. Very similar setup in terms of using chiseled letters and then applying different layer styles to give that glossy gold effect. All right, we are going to take this type and we're going to do something completely opposite with it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group all these layers together. So I select them all. Keyboard shortcut is Command G, or we can select and go create group from the flyout menu. I'll call that my frozen text. I'm going to turn that off momentarily. I'm going to paste in my frozen text once again. And this time what we're going to do with it is we're going to bring in that other texture that I had just a moment ago. We're going to bring in that other texture, and we are going to use it to make our text, our frozen text, not look frozen, but make it look like it's flaming or burning or red hot embers. So we're going to bring that frozen text, that image in. We're going to transform it so it sits over top of the text. And then we're going to add a gradient map adjustment layer to that image to give it a more interesting look and feel. So I'll bring in that texture. I'll transform it so it's the right size. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll just duplicate it. Whoopsie-daisy. Option drag. Just so that I can have some of that texture looking smaller. I'm going to merge those two layers together so I can set them as the adjustment layer. And now I'll set them as an adjustment layer, also known as creating a clipping mask, so that just the texture is visible where the layer is. What we're going to do now is apply a gradient map. This is going to give it that burned, ashy, on fire kind of look. So from the bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to click on create new fill or adjustment layer. It's the one that looks like a little half circle. And I'm going to select gradient map. Grab my property inspector here. I'm going to set it so that it's only applying to the layers below. There we are. I'm going to click on the gradient slider to pull up the gradient editor. And in here, I'm going to add a series of orange, yellows, and reds to make my text look like it's on fire. So I'm going to start with a light yellow. I think in the instructions I say FFEA49D. There. FFE49D. There we are. It says to add it in at location of 100%. So I'll add that in at 100%. You can see its location right there. The next color is an orange. So I'm going to click under my gradient slider to add another color. And the color here is FF8707. FF8707. There. And its location is going to be 81%. And you can eyeball the locations. You don't have to go exactly with what I'm doing. Then I'm going to add a red tab at about 66% location. And the red color I've chosen is B72, C06. Then I'm going to add a gray at 37%. 38, close enough. And that gray color that I chose is 373, 12F. Okay. And then the final color, I'm going to set one more light gray at 0%. And that light gray is 9C, 9C, 9C. Now, I'm going to click OK. My fire doesn't quite look right. What I need to do is I actually need to reverse how my gradient is affecting the type. And when I hit reverse, now you can see it looks like there's areas of ash with fire showing through. And the thing about gradients, if you're doing this kind of effect and it doesn't look quite right, you can always go into your gradient slider and you can click and slide around the gradient slider if you need to kind of increase the desired effect. There you go. Key thing here is just learn to trust your eyeball. You know, no two sets of images, text, colors, or anything are going to combine together in the same way. So just learn to trust your eyeball, look at the screen, and see what you think looks good. Once I've got my type set, I'm going to add a layer below that vector object and create a darker looking background. So I'm going to add a layer in my layer panel. I'll call this, I'll call it a hot background or whatever you want to call it, something like that, so I know it's not the frozen background. And I'm going to fill it with a darker color. In the instructions, I've got 352 F2C. Fill it, Shift F5. There we are. I then added a gradient. Again, just to give it a little more depth. Background gradient. Keyboard shortcut is G for gradient. There we go. Now it looks like our type is sitting on some kind of a darker background. And then we're going to use our layer styles to add a glow effect, an inner glow, an outer glow, and a drop shadow. So I'll go back and select my frozen text. I'm going to add a layer style. I'll start with inner glow. We're going to set the blend mode to screen. Opacity at about 50%. Color is a light yellow. The instructions I've got FDD A61. Technique, it says, is softer, and the size is about 10 pixels. And I'm actually going to pull it back. It's just a little bit too bright on the edge of my type. I'm going to pull it back a little. And then I'm going to add an outer glow. Outer glow blend mode is overlay. Opacity will be about 15%. Color is going to be an orange. It says here FFA 810. Spread is about 1%, and the size is about 9. And I'm going to actually bump up the brightness, the opacity, sorry, just because it's on mine. It's not showing up that well. There we go. Making it just a little bit brighter. And then last, I'm going to add a drop shadow. This one is going to be screen blend mode. The color will be a dark red. I've got 511, 803, 56% for the opacity. Distance is 1 pixel. Spread is 15%. And the size is 32. So what that's doing is that's making me look like I've got a extra large glow around my type. I'll click OK. And now I've got my type. I'll probably tinker with the inner and the outer glows. My glow actually now looks almost a little too powerful. I'll pull my drop shadow back a little. Pull my outer glow back a little. There we go. Same with my inner glow. Actually, inner glow is okay. Just eyeballing it to see what looks good. There we go. Looks a little bit less overpowering. The idea here now, I've got type that now looks like it is not made out of ice, but it is made out of some kind of frozen burning coal or something. I'll tinker with these settings. It's totally up to you how you want to tinker with it. The last step that I've got in the instructions is I added a new layer at the very top of the layer order. I'm going to call this one Ember Glow. And then I'm going to go in with a really light yellow. I'm going to select my paintbrush. I'm going to select small brush with 0% hardness. I'm going to set my opacity for my brush down really low, so I'm painting with a small amount of paints. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of soft spots over top of where the brightest yellows are. The idea is I want to make it look like it's got some spots just have a little bit more glow than others. So those hot embers are really showing through. And you can play with your brush size as you're doing this. So if you want to add an even bigger glow, make your brush a little bigger, maybe drop your opacity down even more so you can build the effect up. The idea is you're trying to make the brightest parts look extra glowy. And now I've got some red hot molten lava style text, glowing embers kind of thing. And pretty much once you get the hang of something like this, there's so many different ways you can format and edit text using Photoshop and Illustrator together. I personally like to create the style of my text in Illustrator because it's easy to do so as a vector file, and then apply and play around with different effects and textures in Photoshop to create something that ends up having kind of a neat, interesting look. It adds value to your posters. You know, it makes it look like it's got something a lot more interesting than just plain old, ordinary, boring text. It can add visual interest, help add with hierarchy, many different things that it can do. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and you have some fun playing around with text in Photoshop and Illustrator together.